and I just felt victimized. I felt like, boy, what can I, I needed to make a shift. I needed to make a shift. I had all this burning anger in me, but, I needed to make a shift and do something. And I realized at that point that, I can blame the doctors for not coming up with a cure, and I can blame the police for not doing anything about the identity theft, and I can blame everybody else all the way to my grave, but where is it going to get me? I needed to start taking personal responsibility and accountability for the outcome of my life. And so I made that shift. I focused my anger, and I said, if it's the last thing I do, I am going to go out there and I'm going to catch the person doing this to me and put him behind bars so he can't be doing this to other patients. And I had a purpose. It gave me something to be angry at, sink my teeth into, wake up in the morning and be passionate about. And so I did. I literally put a backpack on. At the time, I had no immune system, so I had to put a backpack on, pumping fluids and antibiotics, sort of an artificial immune system, into my chest minute by minute to keep me alive. Had to have a mask on and everything, but I left that hospital and I went out and I investigated that crime. I found out what addresses were being used. I found out who lived at the address. I started to realize, after going to the address and banging on the door, I said, wait a minute, all the mail that's going to this address, it's in my name, it's my mail. So I went down to the post office, screamed at them, filled out a change of address form, and started to begin getting all the criminals' mail. Had lists of all the charges, the places where he shopped, the times, and I started interviewing the storekeepers where he had shopped, got descriptions of the guy, found out that he was wearing hospital scrubs. So I was right. Somebody in the hospital or in the medical industry was doing this. And still, I got to a point where I had names, I had addresses, I had all this file, this investigation file that I had put together. Still, nobody would lift a finger. The police just said, well, the charges aren't all in our city, they're very small, we've got bigger priorities, just cancel the cards and move on. And that was just totally unacceptable to me. So I started making stuff up. I called the mayor's office, and I demanded to speak to the mayor right away, and of course, he didn't call me back right away, and so I wrote a press release for immediate release. Cancer patient's ID stolen by hospital staff. Mayor's office refuses to respond. Sound good, right? Faxed it to the mayor's office. Faxed it to ABC, NBC. I mean, I had nothing better to do. I was laying on my back in the hospital, right? So I started to get some attention. And after a few days, I guess it was a slow news day or something, but an investigative reporter with NBC called me in the hospital and said, hey, we're going to come up and interview. I said, please, get up here. I need some attention on this. And when they got up there, the doctor said, no, he's way too sick. You can't come in here to interview him. And so they called me, and I had my cell phone in the hospital bed, and I said, I'll be right out. So I literally made him unhook all my machines and wheel me out of the hospital. And right there in front of the hospital, I was crying, upset, everything, pointing there. Somebody in this building is stealing my identity, and I demand justice and everything. Well, I started to get a lot of attention after that. And people started calling in from the community, hey, this could be my neighbor. Maybe you should check this out. And it wasn't long before I was able to isolate a video of this man making purchases in a home improvement store in my name, buying thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. And we aired it on the 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock news, and that was it. We had about 30 calls come in the next day, identifying him as Richard Gibson, a lab technician, not even in the main hospital, but in the bone marrow transplant clinic where I was being treated. Can you believe that? This guy saw me come in there on my deathbed, tested my blood, knew how sick I was, and targeted me. But I felt amazing triumph in catching him. So I knew the Seattle police weren't going to do anything, so I called the federal government. I said, I demand that, every time I go into a doctor's office, I keep signing this patient privacy paperwork stuff, this HIPAA. I said, if this is not a direct violation of my patient privacy, then what is? I demand he be prosecuted in federal court. And I handed my files over to the FBI, and they agreed to take the case. About that time, the doctors came to me and said, again, Eric, we're sorry. Your transplant has failed. Your disease is back, and there's nothing else we can do. We're going to start arranging hospice care for you, and we give you less than a month or so. And I said, all right, that's it. If everybody told me there was nothing I could do about the identity theft, they were telling me there's nothing I could do about my illness, I need to take accountability and responsibility for my future. So I started doing research. Went to clinicaltrials.gov, did research on stem cells, what was going on in Europe and Asia, where they do all different types of research with stem cells. And I found out that, you know what? Even though the American doctors weren't offering me any solutions that they didn't have at their institution at that time, there were other options out there. There were other sources of stem cells. For example, a non-controversial source of stem cells that we throw away every day in this country is cord blood. The umbilical cord from newborn babies is rich in stem cells and can cure so many diseases. Why hadn't they offered this to me? What was going wrong? What was the malfunction in our medical system that wasn't giving me these options? So I did some more research. I found a transplant center in Minneapolis that was experimenting with it. And as sick as I was, I packed my bags in my truck and I drove all the way from Seattle to Minneapolis and checked myself into the hospital to undergo the most intense treatment I had had at that point. I mean, think about it this way. I had a cancer of my immune system. So how do you kill somebody's immune system without killing them? You can't. You literally do need to kill them. You need to radiate and chemo them until there's nothing left, and then sort of reboot them with a new system, with these baby stem cells. So obviously, it was a good choice. Here I stand before you today. My blood is 2 years old, Italian, female. Thank you. Because we don't have a national cord blood bank in this country, I had to go offshore and find the stem cells that saved my life in Italy, in the Italian National Cord Blood Bank. So there's a lot of lessons in this story for all of us, and I was only able to touch on some of them. But I want to, what are some of the lessons that we can all learn from my experience? By the way, you get to be very lucky in that sense, because you get to learn some of the lessons that I learned during my experience without having to go through 2 years of trauma and torture. So, what are some of the things that we can learn from it? Well, one, the story is a good example of the balance in the universe. For example, for those of you who know a little bit about physics, for every action, there's a reaction. For all the positive energy and good things you do, and the more you give to society, the more you will get back. Exponentially. And look at my diagnosis. If I hadn't been going into the Red Cross to donate blood for kids with leukemia, I would never have been diagnosed in time and would not be standing here in front of you today. Talk about a karmic refund, in a sense. So, how is this lesson in giving